Hello, everyone, and welcome to Orthodoxy. My name is Andy Schmidt, and I'm your host. Today, I got to talk with Katy Faust. Katy is the founder and president of Them Before Us, a global movement defending children's rights to their mother and father. She has written for USA Today, World Magazine, Daily Signal, The Federalist, and many other publications. She has also co-written several books, including Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City, Them Before Us, and the newest one, which she edited and also contributed to, called Pro-Child Politics. In our podcast, in this episode, we talked about a multitude of different things. We talked about the breakdown of the institutions in America and how the breakdown of these institutions have really affected families and children and kids. We talked about public schools, whether or not Christians should send their kids to public school, to high schools and middle schools and run by the government. We kind of disagreed there, but it was an interesting conversation. And we really just discussed how a lot of the bad policies in America really end up falling down on children, on kids, whether it be abortion policies or policies relating to economics and also just taxation, and how we are overspending as a country, and that is going to be kicked down the can's going to be kicked down the road, and the people that are going to have to deal with that are our children, are the next generations, in which they're going to have to pay for the things that the current generations are spending without the money. And so anyways, the whole conversation kind of revolves around what it means to be pro-child in your political approach. So I had a great conversation. I think it was very fun, and I hope you enjoy it. Okay, so I'm here with Katy Faust. Am I saying that right? Faust?
Faust, just like the man who sold his soul to the devil, Faust.
And who did that? I don't know that story.
That is probably one of the greatest legends, operas, novels ever to be written and transmitted in Germany. It was written by Goethe, then I think turned into an opera. But it is, if you've heard of Mephistopheles, right? Mm-hmm. That is the villain, the Satan character in Faust. And Faust is the guy who wanted power, specifically spiritual power, magical power, to the point where he sold his soul to the devil. So it is actually sort of an archetype. So you will hear the term Faustian bargain, right? Which means, well, I'm willing to do anything to get what I want, kind of thing. So that is not the reason why I love this last name, because I do love this last name. Mm-hmm. It's because when I first met my husband on day 3 of freshman orientation of college, we met, and then it was a few days later that I saw him walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, my name's Ryan Faust." That's fist in German. And I thought, yeah, fist. Yeah. I was like, I could rock that last name. So anyway, I'm very happy to be a Faust, very happy to, even though I loved my maiden name, happy to shed it to become to begin a new little platoon under the banner of Faust.
It is already a controversial thing that's brought up, right? Nowadays, young women don't want to. I saw this stupid TikTok. It was ridiculous. It was like this guy, I think it was a guy or a girl. I can't remember. It might have been one of the Ben Shapiro Reacts things. And he was like, if I get married and my wife, and we take her last name, it's actually her grandpa's last name. But then if we get rid of his, then it's his father's last. And it's like, yeah, dude, that's like this. They couldn't figure that as like a new thing.
These women who don't want to take their husband's name, like, you're going to have a man's name. Is it going to be your father's, or is it going to be your husband's? Right. Bind yourself to your husband. You guys are the ones that are starting a joint project for the world together. And you know what's awesome? Children feeling like, you want to talk about, we were talking a little before the recording started about sort of Carl Truman and the expressive individualism, and that mentality and mindset has separated children, people from all different ways that we have historically accessed our identity and grounded ourselves in something beyond our feelings, beyond our immediate experience. And honestly, family and kinship is a big part of that. Yeah. And so you see children that have experienced family breakdown or family fragmentation specifically struggling more often with their identities. And of course, the world will say, you should choose a sexual identity, because right now we don't let kids choose their racial identity. That's still not allowed, right? But if you want to opt into an oppressed group or opt into a favored category, you can always modify your sexual identity or your gender identity. And a lot of the times, if we aren't able to ground ourselves in the more transcendent ways that humans have always created a solid, stable, long-lasting identity, you're much more susceptible to this expressive individualism sort of narrative. So I personally think, ladies, binding yourself to your husband, creating a new small unit that your kids can say, that's mine, I belong here. If I'm trying to figure out who I am, part of it is going to be I'm a girl or I'm a boy, but a lot of it is going to be I'm a Faust. And I'm connected to this man and this woman. They're not going anywhere. They're committed to me. We move together as a unit. And they're not on their own. They're not floating atoms out there trying to connect to something. They belong to us. They're in a nucleus. And name that nucleus and make sure that you're doing it together.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Actually, I wonder, so you obviously just brought a bunch of different things up, and I think our conversation today will be about, at the core of it, I think expressive individualism and the way that Carl Trueman describes it in The Rise and Triumph is in some way, that is the core of the battle here. It's like the Christian ethic for a lot of Christians who are actually genuine Christians, kind of butting up against the expressive individualistic worldview, or the way that Francis Schaeffer describes as humanism versus Christianity or Reformed Christianity. And yet, one of the things that I've been interested in trying to figure out is not even necessarily the fundamental philosophical or theological principles butting up against each other, but the methods in which these principles are being played out. So one thing that has been frustrating to me in the Protestant church, and more so non-denominational and low church situations, is that there's a lot of talk of marriage. There's a lot of talk sometimes of marriage, and they call themselves conservative sometimes, marriage and have kids and do the right things, and reject the sort of expressive individualistic and liberal ethos and live as conservative Christians. And yet the very function in which a lot of these churches actually practically play themselves out in real time is completely expressive individualist. And so as young people, and I noticed this in myself, is that going to, there's a massive church here in Madison, Wisconsin called Blackhawk Church. And it's like thousands of that. It's one of the biggest evangelical churches in the country. And we went there for a couple of years, and you have all of these kind of these, I guess, sayings or tropes that are just like, hey, family and marriage, and these things are good. And yet when you see as a young person, you're being told to do the right thing, but then you're watching everybody, or feminism's bad or something like that. But then you're watching, well, all of these women with kids are working in the church 40 hours a week and sending their kids to government institutions and not actually living out the thing that they're telling me to live out. I haven't reconciled how I should articulate it. I probably didn't articulate it well. Have you thought about that and what is actually happening in this non-denominational low church situations in which everybody preaches this thing, but then they just totally don't live it, and then nobody has any problem with that?
I don't know if I have seen the same thing, probably because we have been living in Seattle for 14 years. We are not living in a place that is in any way, I'm sure, like Madison, Wisconsin, in any way hospitable to the Christian worldview. And so what's going on here is I feel like we are really the remnant, and even more so over the last 5 years, because there's been a massive exodus of Christians and conservatives from Washington in general and Seattle specifically. So the people that are still here, they mean it.
Yeah.
They can't leave. They won't leave. They feel called to stay. And I don't see a lot of hypocrisy here. I don't see a lot of double standards. I see a lot of people whose faith have been sifted, purified, and shaken to the point of being very serious about the things that matter. And I haven't seen, I understand that it probably happens in some mega churches, maybe other places in the country that are more, historically Bible belty, where it's easy to sort of live a double life or have that hypocrisy. I honestly just haven't seen it. I see very faithful men and women trying to have enough money to buy gas and really struggling with, like beggars, trying to figure out how to parent their children, because it is so expensive to live here that most of the moms, even if they want to stay home with their kids, do have some kind of at least part-time side hustle, really just so that their kids can I mean, they're not extravagantly driving like two gorgeous cars. Like
Yeah.
they just want to make sure their kids can pay their soccer fees, for example. So I'm not going to doubt that kind of double patterning, like we're saying one thing, we're living in another way, happens in some places. I personally just haven't seen it. What I have seen is, I've been really involved in our church for 14 years. I was running the youth ministry until just earlier this year. I see women who are not in perfect marriages, but in good marriages, faithful marriages, stable marriages. And I see women that are flourishing. Some of them are working full-time, some are part-time, some, especially when their kids are young, get to stay home and want to stay home. But what I see, and I think what their children see, is a very stark contrast between the world outside that is being promoted at their school or at their neighbor's house or on social media, and the goodness and the sweetness, the faithfulness and the security that they're seeing from the people in their churches and modeled most of the time by their own parents. So I will say that there is a bit of a hack of living in Seattle, because we don't have to tell our kids, boy, it's rough out there. Golly, the world is lying to you. Ooh, that's a bad idea. We just let them look around and they go, wow, that is a bad idea. And we go, yeah, I know. That's what happens when you transgress God's good order.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that that's how it's playing out in Seattle, because it hasn't, at least it hasn't in Madison. And that's so that church that I mentioned, they are like totally progressive now. I mean, they do gender hospitality for the youth group, which is just in the Bible, it's just called lying. And it's incredibly disgusting that you do it to kids, and it's evil. But also, like the church that I went to for 7 years, that was one of the biggest conservative churches. Now they're partnering with people who are pro-abortion and who are pro-transgenderism. Yeah. So it's incredibly difficult in Madison to find a actually conservative church, not just a church that says the conservative things and then just does the opposite of it, but is actually actively trying to be conservative. And so on the...
I have to say, I have a lot of patience for people in Seattle that are not Christians, people that disagree, people that have chosen to live another way, new Christians that are trying to figure this out. I have no patience for pastors, theological leaders, anybody that has any level of biblical training or teaching or scholarship or degree who gets these things wrong, especially as it relates to sex and gender, especially as it relates to pronoun use and whether or not we're going to partner with people that are promoting abortion. At that point, you are in millstone around your neck territory, as far as I am concerned. Absolutely. There is no patience. I want to vomit. The only time I've ever unfriended somebody on Facebook was a very progressive friend, very high up in a liberal denomination that sanctioned and ushered in same-sex marriage into her denomination. And I said, you make me want to vomit. I cannot even look at you. Like the repulsion in me is so strong. And to me, and I look at those churches and I say, you can't die soon enough. Grind them into the dust, Lord, and let them be gone forever.
Mm-hmm. Amen. I mean, there's obviously the theological categories that people like to pretend that don't exist, in the way that Paul, Peter, even Jesus himself talked about sin to different categories of people. So obviously you have the leaders, and you can read what Jude says to them. You can read what Peter says to them. I think Jude says in some capacity that there's a special place in hell for people who lead people astray, right? So that's a major problem. Peter says very negative things. Paul, in his epistle to the Galatians, as they attempt to take on a more legalistic theological perspective in the gospel, says anybody who preaches the gospel contrary to the one that I brought to you, let them be accursed. He says that twice for emphasis. He even says if an angel comes and says that, like, you need to measure it based on the apostolic gospel that we brought to you at first. And so there's a way, and the Jesus obviously talking to the Pharisees and calling them whitewashed tombs and saying they're brood of vipers, and saying if anybody leaves a child astray, let tie a millstone around their neck and throw them into the lake, right? There is a categorical difference, though, because the way that Paul then talks to the congregants and to those who are struggling, it's still somewhat intense. I mean, he talks in Corinthians about giving the guy who's sleeping with his mother-in-law, hand him over to Satan. Right. So there's still some intensity there, but I think there's a lot more graciousness because they don't bear the responsibility that Paul talks about, Second Timothy and Titus, the eldership responsibility or the leadership responsibility within the church. And so I think I agree with you. And it seems like the Protestant church cannot figure that out. It's actually not Protestants. It's really across the board. Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, there's certain sects of all these churches that are just ushering in totally unbiblical and totally worldly worldviews and doctrines. And they can't understand that categorical difference. Have you, I guess, so one, do you agree with that assessment? Two, what do you think the church should do about that? What do you think the response should be from the actually true Christians or the conservatives, I guess?
Mm-hmm. First of all, I totally agree with your assessment. And thank God I work with some of the most well-formed, well-read, well-written Catholics out there. I have really been blessed to rub shoulders with people like Robert George and,
wow.
He wrote the foreword for my first book, and, Ryan
I'm
Anderson,
interviewing him in a couple weeks.
Excellent. That's excellent. Yeah. I've really benefited so much from them. I created the teen version of some curriculum for an organization called Katy Faust, which is a defense of marriage sexuality, all based on natural law. And obviously it's very heavily Catholic because the Catholics maintained and have continued to use natural law as a tool, what we would call an apologetics tool. And I really appreciate them. I remember one time, it was 2 summers ago, I was, a Baptist pastor's wife, was leading an online forum for junior hires through Katy Faust. And I was sending my teen daughter, my high school daughter, across the country to attend an in-person Katy Faust event. And her teacher was going to be my good friend who's a Catholic. And one of my students was going to be her daughter, who's a Catholic. And my daughter came home and said, "Oh my gosh, best week of my life. I learned so much. That was amazing. What the heck is going on with Mary, Mom? What are they doing?" And I was like, "Okay, well, let's talk about that." And she's like, "And communion? Can we talk about what there's going?" And so we talked through the differences, the reasons why we're not Catholic and the problems that we have with Catholicism, the area of disagreement. But I said, but here's the thing. I would gladly fly you across the country to sit under Anna's teaching, a devout, highly catechized, well-educated Catholic. I would never send you across the country to learn from a liberal Protestant, ever. Yeah. Right. And she is happy to send her daughter to me to learn about friendship, dating, marriage, same-sex attraction, transgenderism, and abortion from a Baptist pastor's wife. She would never send that daughter to James Martin to learn from a liberal priest. We have more in common. Right now, I feel like the major dividing lines in terms of who we're working with, who we're aligning with, is not Catholic Protestant. It's, are you on the side of biblical truth or not? To me, that's where the main dividing line. And obviously, I'm not Catholic for reasons of recognizing what is and is not authoritative. And obviously, the downstream effects of some of what that looks like in doctrine and practice. But I will say that I have personally benefited from and rejoice when I get to work with a lot of the very solid Catholics who do respect and adhere to biblical truth.
Yeah, it's weird. That's something I've been thinking about recently, just as far as our civilization is falling apart. So we've got to do something about it. Right. And it seems like some of the people that are on our side, as far as conservative Protestant Christians go, are the Catholics. There's a lot of Catholics that I even know too, right, that are totally pro-life. They hate transgenderism. They think it's terrible. And in a lot of ways, they're doing more to fight against these things societally than Protestants are, who just kind of sit back and do nothing because they're I guess, spiritually dead and morally bankrupt. But
I would say it's not necessarily that. To me, it is because they have made the gospel so shallow.
Yeah, right.
They have decided that the whole counsel of Scripture, all of Christianity and the gospel is love God, love people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I mean, if you want to dissect and really make sure you get the definition of love right, that might be true.
Yeah.
But righteousness, justice are a huge part of the biblical worldview and the gospel specifically. But if you excise that aspect of what it means to be God's people on earth, you will almost be required to reject and forsake a lot of the major manifestations of the assault on God's truth that is making itself, evident in culture today. So I think that we have reduced the gospel to niceness and being kind, rather than being the agents of change, the salt and the light that we are charged with being. And as a result, we would not be in this place as a country. And as we'll probably end up talking about, I'm not doing this. I'm not fretting over, oh no, Christendom is dead. I am fretting because children are harmed. I'm fretting because when Christianity recedes, children are victimized in every way children can be victimized. And that is a absolute no-go zone for Christians. Child protection has been and will continue to be a hallmark, a manifestation of our pure and undefiled religion before God. Was in the first century, will be today, will be in 2,000 years. It goes part and parcel. If you are following Christ, if you're believing him, if you're working out the full counsel of Scripture in terms of what it looks like today in the culture, it is always going to manifest as child protection. And because we have failed to do that, children are being victimized. So that's my big beef here.
No, I totally agree. I will say though, real quick, just to make sure that we, because I think that we should partner in some capacity with the Catholics, but in any sort of situation in which language is constantly being twisted and changed, which is the generation that we live in. And J. Gresham Machen writes about it in Christianity and Liberalism. When you don't get the correct definitions, like you're saying, of the biblical words, you can't actually have the gospel. It's a very tricky and deceitful kind of weird thing for people, because they can't actually figure out exactly, okay, why is it wrong to say that God loves me? Well, it's wrong if all of those words aren't properly defined in accordance with the Scriptures and Jesus himself. And that's what we need to work at. So as we begin to, I guess, work forward in society and culture, and moving, I guess, and partnering with different people like the Catholics, and then fighting against the more liberal progressive people, even for the sake of Protestantism and its doctrines, we need to be able to understand our own doctrines and articulate them properly, so that we don't start to then move toward Rome in a way that is still unbiblical and wrong. I'm reading John Owen on scriptural biblical infallibility, and the things that he says about Rome. He said about the Catholics. He said, "I never knew people that worked so tirelessly and so hard to prove to everybody that they're not faithful." And so I know that that's a hardcore thing, but there are. I mean, you read through the doctrines of the Catholic faith, and you read about the infallibility of the Pope, and you read about apostolic succession and transubstantiation at its I guess to its fullest extent in the 7 sacraments instead of the 2 sacraments. And there are major theological problems and differences.
I completely agree.
And I think you agree with that.
Not disagreeing with that at all.
Right.
I mean,
right.
If it was just about beautiful buildings and fantastic hymns, creeds, and liturgy, baby, I would be in.
Yeah, they'd be. Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are very substantial doctrinal differences that even though I have man, my Catholic friends, they're all smart and beautiful, very educated. And I'm like, man, I'd love to run with that crowd a little more, but it's not. I mean, and again, it's a matter of authority. Where is authority vested? And if it is in the big T tradition and that parallels Scripture, you're going to go in a whole nother direction. And I think that the direction is manifested in some really damaging ways. Yeah. Unfortunately.
But not as bad. Yeah. Not as bad as liberalism. And that's why it's important to make that distinction between ethics and doctrines, right? So like the doctrines of the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, and I'm saying Protestant, that's way too generalized, but just say Reformed Protestant Church is, they're very, very, very different. The doctrines are, but a lot of the ethics then, same with Judaism, a lot of the ethics then, that's why we say Judeo-Christian conservatism, because the ethics that are produced out of the doctrines are somewhat similar. And then there's that ability for us to partner and be hand in hand in the ethical pursuits, and then still be totally against each other in the doctrinal argumentation and things like that. And so I think, I'm not trying to nitpick or anything like that, but those distinctions I think are important. Now, as far as liberalism goes, it's like so hard to even pin down what they think because they're constantly shifting and changing and redefining.
Burn it all down.
So what does that even look like though? Because I agree with you. Children and your book, the book that you edited, what is it called? I forget.
Pro-child politics is the most recent.
Yes.
But what does it look like? Well,
yes.
For the most part, they'll just fade into culture. I mean, you look at the mainstream Protestant denominations, they're completely indistinguishable from MSNBC. So they're just going to, there's no reason to go to those churches. They do not offer anything distinct. But also, I think we savage them when it comes to the ways that their compromise is harming the most vulnerable. And take the gloves off. You don't have to destroy people, but if you are not serious about destroying those arguments, children are going to suffer. So that is my thing, is like, I understand that there is this hesitance to say, well, I don't want to be mean. And I'm like, you don't have to be mean to people, but your refusal to speak up on a lot of these cultural issues, it's not victimless. Like, if you do not speak, children will be victimized. Okay. So you just have to be very, very honest with yourself that the reason why you're not saying anything is because you prefer social acceptance to child protection. That's the wager that you're making. Okay.
Well, let's just say that in its fullness, just because they prefer social acceptance to murdering children, and because that's where it's manifested in its worst possible way. And that's what's happening at rates that we've never seen in human history before. 3,000 babies a day are murdered. And that's just the ones that we count. We don't talk about IVF. We don't talk about the pill.
Exactly right. That's right. Yep. That's right. And it really happens on all the different issues. I mean, like obviously our work at Them Before Us focuses a lot on marriage and family as matters of justice for children. So whether it's divorce or the rise of sort of modern families, same-sex parents, transgender parents, reproductive technologies like IVF, sperm and egg donation, surrogacy, cohabitation, polygamy. I mean, like we look at all of those things as this is actually about children. It is about justice for children. And we expect all adults, single, married, gay, straight, fertile and infertile, to conform to the rights of children, because the only alternative is for children to conform to what adults want. And that, Christian friends, is called injustice. Okay, that is something that biblical scripture, biblical truth, the biblical worldview always condemns. We are not a religion that forces the weak to sacrifice for the strong. We are a religion, Old Testament, New Testament, the pattern of our very own, like Lord, Savior, and founder. He modeled the strong sacrificing for the weak. And then he said, go do likewise. So this is all matters of child protection in marriage and family. We talk about a lot about that at Them Before Us. Obviously, you see that playing itself out in matters of abortion. It is the exact same thing in matters of reproductive technologies, such as IVF, right? These are two sides of the same child commodifying coin. And then beyond that, looking at protection of children's physical bodies from transgender treatments, protection of children's innocence and mind from things like pornography delivered to their smartphone in their pocket, to innocence violating sex ed curriculum, to drag queen story hours, and then moving into economics. Like, children should not be born with $74,000 of debt that they already owe for programs that they're never going to benefit from, which is currently what's going on today. They deserve to be secure. So
wait, that's you're saying per child. So per 74,000, they're being born into that sort of, that's because of taxation. And
that is because of rampant spending.
Yeah.
That is because of the debt that we have run up, and we forced them to pay because we were unwilling to pay. So I guess what I'm saying is, I kind of summarize this as their life, their family, their mind, their body, their security, their future. Okay. Children are being victimized in all of those different areas. One thing that we tried to do in pro-child politics is I conscripted these 19 subject matter experts on immigration and policing and religious liberty and masculinity and femininity, pornography, transgenderism, IVF and abortion, to just say, what would happen if you put kids first? What would happen if you protected kids? What kind of policies? What kind of outcome would we see? So we at Them Before Us, our primary work is marriage and family, but we actually think that you should think about all of politics as a matter of protection for children. And the amazing thing is, when you do, you get fantastic policy. You get child protection, and you also get national protection.
So what are you guys doing specifically? I know that you're doing like law related things, right? But and we can talk about that. But as far as the battle for, let's just say, the cultural story, because ultimately we can regulate and put laws in place. We can fight back against laws that we don't like, and that's all good. I think we need to do that for sure. But people's hearts and minds aren't actually being changed through law, right? Like regulation doesn't necessarily change people's hearts and minds. It just changes their behavior in some capacity, which can be a really good thing. And as far as abortion goes, I totally think we need to just federal ban on abortion, because you shouldn't murder children, and that's wrong. And I don't really care how you feel about it. But how do you? Are you doing things on both fronts, on the legal front and then on the kind of social story front? Want to start reading the Puritans but don't know where to begin? Or do you not know who the Puritans are and want to get to know them? Well, the Puritan Treasures for Today from Reformation Heritage Books makes the riches of these godly writers of old accessible for the modern reader. With updated language and helpful introductions, these classic works from John Owen, Jeremiah Burroughs, and more are the perfect starting point for the curious reader. You can learn more about the Puritan Treasures for Today at heritagebooks.org/Puritan Treasures. If you use the coupon code Orthodoxy, you can get 10% off of your order. That's heritagebooks.org/Puritan Treasures. Use the code Orthodoxy to get 10% off of your order. I actually have two of the books right here, two ones that they look interesting. One of them, it's called The Cure for Unjust Anger by John Downame. I think that I'm saying that correctly, but The Cure for Unjust Anger, and then Contempt, Prosperity, and God's Glory by Jeremiah Burroughs. Both are super interesting, and the Puritan writings have been super influential on people like Charles Spurgeon, on my favorite theologian, J.I. Packer, and many others, John Piper. They talk about these Puritans as these kind of great theological figures of old. The best way that I've heard it described is in the beginning of a book by J.I. Packer called The Quest for Godliness. J.I. Packer discusses walking through the redwoods in California and looking up at these massive trees and feeling so small in comparison to these trees as he looks up, and he just sees they just go on and on and on and up and up and up. And he says that is how we should feel in relationship to the Puritans. There are these massive redwoods. There are these theological giants of the past that we should look up to and feel small in comparison to it, but try to reach towards what they were doing theologically, what they were actually living out practically in their everyday Christian life. The Puritans are some of the most important writers and thinkers and people in the history of the West, especially for Americans, especially for Protestants in America. And so I really, really, really encourage people to go check out the Puritan Treasures for Today. It is a full set of Puritan writings, John Owen, Jeremiah Burroughs. I mean, some of the best theological writers of all time. You can use the code Orthodoxy. You get 10% off. I mean, it's already not very expensive, but 10% off is fantastic. So use the code Orthodoxy to get 10% off of your order. Go to heritagebooks.org/Puritan Treasures.
Yes.
Okay.
Great setup there. People are like, what are you trying to do? And I'm like, global takeover.
Yeah, right.
I want to take over the globe. I
Yeah.
want children to be the center of every conversation, whether it is in the culture or the courtroom, whether it's in the personal or the political. And what you said is exactly right. It is not enough to simply try to fight bad legislation and propose model legislation. It is not enough to just submit amicus briefs to the Supreme Court when they're about to make a decision that's going to impact the entire nation. You have to change hearts, but you also have to change laws. Those two things go hand in hand. If you only get one or the other, children are not going to be protected. You have to do both. So what are we doing on the cultural front to change hearts? We are co-producing a documentary with Focus on the Family that is going to be close to $1 million project, globally distributed next year. We have a church curriculum that we just put out that's on our website for free. You can go to thembeforeus.com, resources for churches. I will walk you through in a 7-series video curriculum all of the different child-centric aspects of marriage and family. We've got resources for businesses. If you want to protect children using your HR benefits, we will tell you exactly how to do that. We have the Pro-Child Politics book, which is really training people to put them before us in every area, whether you are talking about ESG and DEI or education or, laws around pornography or race. I mean, everything is like, put kids first. And we recently were tapped to do a radio show on American Family Radio, second largest Christian broadcaster in the nation, where we just spend an hour every weekend training people to think about things from the child's perspective and then charging them with child protection. So it's been a very explosive year of growth. My prayer is that it will just be exponential. And every year we're going to have magnitudes of order of growth, because the threats to children right now are things that we've never seen before in humanity. Yeah. And this is no longer a question of, are kids going to survive? Is our nation going to, are kids going to thrive? Is our nation going to thrive? It is now, we're at a civilizational moment, honestly. Will we survive? Will children survive? Because we are really looking at processes, procedures, cultural, legal, and technological that have the capacity to completely undermine us as a society.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic. I'm optimistic about what you're doing and what a lot of people are trying to move toward. But I have noticed, well, one, the suicide rates are incredibly high among young people, especially young men. Yeah. And that's just devastating. I mean, I had a friend a couple of years ago who killed himself, and he was in the church and he asked for help from the church. The church did absolutely nothing about it. And so,
did he have a strong, loving relationship with his father?
No, and his parents are probably gonna get pissed off at me for saying this because they don't want me to talk. They don't want me to talk about this publicly. But I knew him for 2 years, and I was closest with him than almost anybody else. And there's some conflict there. But no, he did not like his parents. He was very clear to me about that. He was very clear to my friends about that. They seem to have a different perspective on that. It's hard to tell with somebody who commits suicide. It's like what's true and what's not true. You just killed yourself, Right. And then in the aftermath of that, everybody just lies about everything all the time. Oh, it was such an amazing person. Oh, we loved him. We cared about him so much. And all this. It's like, actually, no, you didn't. You weren't there for him 2 months ago when he was alive, and now you're here because this is a popular, trendy thing to do to make yourself look good and try to, I guess, suppress the probably proper and remorseful and regretful and guilt emotions that you should be feeling as they relate to the situation. That said, I don't feel like things are at a foundational level changing to the level that it needs to change because of the institutional decline. And I hate to say that the institutions have this much power, but I think that's just a reality, whether that be the media institutions, the governmental institutions, the government school institutions, educational institutions, even the institutions that I think are trying to do some good, oftentimes are still subconsciously or just blindly in some capacity still influenced and still operating out of this expressive individualism or this lust for power and money or whatever that is. I mean, in Mega Basham's book, Shepherds for Sale, I just interviewed her. I think that proved that in a lot of ways, that if that's happening in the Christian circles, in the Christian institutions, that's totally going to be happening in the secular, more culturally conservative institutions. So I guess my question is I guess, how do you change that fundamental? What do you do? Yeah, that's my question. I know that you've kind of said that a little bit, but what do you do about that?
You're right. There's complete institutional capture. Mm-hmm. From the universities to the education system as a whole, to media and entertainment. Yeah. Even unfortunately to, like you said, some of our churches are being co-opted into this. Yeah. The only institution that has not been completely captured is the family. Yeah. There are certain institutional, the smallest of all institutions that resist. And I would say that certainly from what I'm seeing in Seattle, the families that are resisting have been radicalized. Like even more than 5 and 10 years ago, those of us that have decided to reject the progressive monolith that is coming for us in every area, we have opened our eyes and realized we're going to fight you so hard. Mm-hmm. We are going to fight you so hard. We are going to train up kids that are so immune to these false, destructive narratives. You're never going to get them. Mm-hmm. And like full disclosure, that's why I wrote my second book, Raising Conservative Kids in a Woke City. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much just like, this is me and my co-author, Stacy, between us, 7 kids, largely raised in public school. You can't touch our kids. You can't touch our kids. They are so inoculated against all of the garbage that you have thrown at them. Their worldview is so strong. Their spiritual muscles are so toned. That now, they'll see something on social media that's a lie, or they'll get an assignment from their teacher, and all it does is serve to strengthen their worldview muscles. Now, I understand that there's people that will disagree with that decision. And honestly, if I had had the money, sure, I would have sent my kids to private school the whole time.
Well, let's disagree. Let's do the disagreement now. Let's do it, because so what I usually say.
Let me just circle back and say the whole point of me telling you this story is the country is going to collapse unless Christian and conservative parents have more babies and then disciple their babies. The only way out of this, because we can't retake the institutions, we might be able to create parallel polis, like alternative parallel institutions. Yeah. But honestly, the real hope is we breed them out.
It's not very hard when they're murdering their own. So it's like we've got a bit of an advantage there, but don't just hit the 2-kid quota, kind of go above and beyond, and adopt kids, that's another thing. But, so totally agree with everything except for the public school stuff. And I want to get the disagreement about public. I wanted to talk to you about this because before I do podcasts, I kind of just researched people and listened to different things. And there was a podcast that you did about public schools, and you said you sent your kids to the public schools. Now I'll give you my position on this, and we can go back and forth a little bit, and then we can move on from it. But what I usually call the public school system is the intellectual Auschwitz. I think it's the worst institution that has ever existed in American history, besides Planned Parenthood. Granted, I'm not exactly sure I don't actually know how to reconcile this, because in the Bible, it is very, very clear that the apostles would rather us give our lives than what we believe in and what we intellectually think and know about God. We would rather die than be killed intellectually or be killed in belief. And so, is it worse? Which institution is worse? They're both equally horrible, and I don't want to necessarily, debate that. But as somebody who went to probably one of the most progressive school districts in the country in Madison, Wisconsin, I cannot think of a more horrific thing to do to your kids than send them to the public schools. And my parents regret it, and I will never send. I told my wife when we was like, I will work 6 jobs for our kids to be homeschooled. Nobody's going to teach my kids except for myself, because education is indoctrination. And this is one of the points that Michael Knowles makes in his book Speechless, I thought was really interesting. Education is indoctrination. The question is not whether or not it's indoctrination. The question is, what sort of indoctrination is it? And then I think I would add another question to that is, then to what extent are they being indoctrinated into that particular worldview or ideology? And in the public school system, you have 40 hours a week in which they're being indoctrinated into anti-human, anti-God, anti-Christian, and not even like God-hating, human-hating, Christian-hating ideologies that ultimately produce murder of other people or the murder of themselves. And the proportion at which these kids are being taught in the schools is completely, developmentally inappropriate for a parent to send their kid. And I mean, I hear the argument, my kid can evangelize. It's like, your 15-year-old's not going to evangelize in the schools. That's the dumbest thing. I'm one of the most disagreeable people ever. I didn't do it. And so it's because it's hard. You have the institution coming at you. You have the students coming at you. You have the general ethos. You have the popularity and hierarchies and stuff like that are all coming at you. And so that's the first thing is it's a developmentally inappropriate stage at which we would expect a kid who we don't actually know if they're genuine Christians because they're only 15 and they haven't actually dealt with a lot of real world problems to go into a place in which 500 people disagree with them all of the time. And then 2, I think it's just as far as math goes, like, 40 hours a week at the public schools, you're at home, but are you interacting with at home, I guess 40 equal hours, if not 50 hours of the exact opposite intentional training? And the answer is no for 99% of people. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously you sent your kids to public schools. I guess I am just saying you did the wrong thing, but you go ahead and tell me what I'm missing here. I don't know.
Well, I'm the right girl to disagree with, because there are some other women that would fall apart. Thank God you're not talking to one of those sensitive women. And I also, we've got 4 kids. I'm not saying we're out of this all the way, but 2 girls in solid they chose to go to very solid Christian colleges, 2 boys that are still in high school who are all doing very well. So I will say you're right about the dangers. You're right about the indoctrination machine that can be present. I would say it certainly depends on the teacher, the year, the district, the school itself. And I will say that I think homeschool is a great option, especially in the early years. Our personal philosophy is you do, especially up until age 11 or 12, want to shelter them from the distortions of the world in that grammar phase of learning where they just sponge up everything and they don't think critically. That if you're going to homeschool or if you have to choose when to homeschool, I think the early years are the best years to do it. And then, later on, when the critical thinking does develop, you introduce them to those concepts, right? Even if they are going to a public school, you are the person that tells them about porn. You're the one that educates them on pronouns and transgender issues and abortion. They hear it from you first. You can and must still be the primary educator of your child. And you do need to evaluate, is this friction, like you said, social pressure or the different messages they're getting from the school, is the friction grinding them down? Or is it sharpening them? So you do have to really watch that carefully. And all I'll say is one thing, we did youth ministry for a long time before my husband became a senior pastor. And then I continued while he was the senior pastor. And we have seen both extremes of parenting. We've seen the complete permissive parent where there's no boundaries, there's no filters, total access to everything, self-directing, gentle parenting, blah, 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 blah.
Gosh,
and then we've seen the other side, which is hyper sheltering, hyper control, no exposure. Both of those are disasters. Both of those leads to children that cannot function, they're not equipped, they can't stand on their own. What we vowed to do, even before we had kids, was we wanted to shepherd our children through everything the world was going to throw at them while they were in our home. And in that sense, why? Because then you can walk through it with them. You're hyper connected to them. You're physically present with them. You are, and especially in high school, you need to be highly emotionally connected. That is the number one rule for high schoolers. You're not telling them what to do with their money or which sports to play or even what school they should go to. We let our high schoolers choose where to go to school. You need to be hyper emotionally connected so that you can consult with them when they come home and say, you would not believe what my teacher handed out to us today. Or, oh, look at this flag that's hanging in the window of the class next door. And then, which my 14-year-old said, come home, let's talk about that, right? What does the text of that say? But what is the subtext under that? So for us, I'm not going to say that we're all the way through and that boom, perfect success. I will say that for the 4 kids that we have right now between the ages of 14 and 21, nothing has been able to make them bend yet. Maybe they will. Maybe one of them will turn out to be a Bernie bro, and that will be awful. But for now,
that would be terrible. Yeah.
That slow drip of controlled exposure where they hear from us first, where they're anchored and connected to us, seems to have created teens that are very solid in their convictions, who have had a chance to explore what the biblical and the conservative worldview has to say about all of the topics that are being tossed around in culture right now, who have been able to test, is this worth standing up for? Can I stand alone? And what's amazing is we don't send them to the public school so they can be missionaries. Honestly, we did it because we were broke. We were, so poor for so long. And I did try homeschooling for a year, and my kids were like, we like going to a school, please send us to a class. And we weren't afraid. We weren't afraid of our children being indoctrinated in that, because we had felt like we were indoctrinating them. You're exactly right. It is indoctrination. There's no neutral education. And we just saw in all of their lives that the woke worldview that they were hearing from school actually served as a foil that reinforced the goodness of the biblical worldview. And we didn't send them as missionaries, but they did convert and they did fortify and they were able to speak truth into the lives of friends, and they did earn the respect of those around them. And they were able to become leaders when it came to standing firm or speaking out or pushing back. And was there discomfort? Yep, there was. Did they lose some friends at some point? Yes. They did. But also, I don't care where they go to college. They have already seen and experienced and tasted, fought back and overcome, not everything, but most things that you're going to have to face as a kid. They did it in our house with us next to them and realized I can do this. And even if it costs me a grade or it costs me a friendship or I get blocked on Instagram, I'm okay. I lived through it.
So, okay. And that's great. And I'm obviously not going to disagree with that because it's your family. So I don't know like all the details like you do, but obviously that's a particularity within a general statistic. I mean, the general statistics show that two things. You mentioned youth group, and it's another thing that I went to my whole life and was basically useless. But and actually, the statistics show two things. One, kids who go to youth groups, the vast majority of them did not maintain their Christianity. Like a ton of them.
That's all you're doing for sure.
Right, right.
So when it comes to like continuing your faith, the two things that I've seen that really mean that kids are adhering to the faith is a warm relationship with the Father, not even a father that is doctrinally astute, a warm relationship with the Father that is ongoing all through middle school, high school, and into college, that hyper connected, not with mom, with dad. I'm not saying moms are not important. I am here crusading on behalf of kids. I ran the youth ministry at church. Fathers, your warmth is one of the greatest.
What do you mean by warmth? Like specific? I kind of get what you're saying. The connectedness. I actually don't.
Tenderness. Like my dad knows me, gets me, loves me, likes me, not just loves me. He likes me. He wants to be with me. I feel close to him. That's why I'm saying, especially in the high school years, connectedness with your teen is way more important than preaching, lecturing, correcting. Hyper connection with your team, especially if you have done the work of building the foundation, if you've instilled the good, true, and beautiful through elementary school and middle school. In high school, it is the warmth of relationship that you want with them, especially dads. The other thing is in high school, they have to feel like they got honest answers to honest questions. So those are the two things,
totally.
A safe place where they can really probe those doctrinal issues. And if they come to you and say, why does our church hate gays? And your response is, well, because God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Goodbye. That kid's walking away. Okay. They have to get satisfying answers as to why your church or your family is bucking the trend when it comes to what the culture is pushing down their throats. If they get an answer of children need, deserve, and have a right to their mother and father, those two adults are going to statistically grant them the safest household, ensure that they're loved, invest the most time and attention in them, grants them their biological identity so they can develop a stable answer to the question, who am I, offers the maternal and paternal love that maximizes child development, that happens to reflect God's design for sex and marriage. If we adopt this position of same-sex marriage, if we affirm gay marriage, what we're doing is we're victimizing kids. Christians don't do that. Kids get that kind of answer at youth group, there's a better chance that they're going to be able to hold on to college. So I agree that youth group, that's just pizza and movie night and come on in and feel good, not helpful. But youth groups that actually do like worldview training, that's exactly what churches need to be doing for teens.
Okay. I can see what you're saying, but the methodology thing comes into play here again, because I don't actually think that you would need that institution or program, let's just say the youth program, if you actually had parents teaching their kids properly. And so what it ultimately ends up doing subconsciously to parents is that it whether they know it or not, it happens to everybody. And I think it's going to probably happen to me. That's why I don't want our kids to go to youth group, because I want that full responsibility for the raising of my kids to be on me and me alone. And if my kids walk away from the faith, that's my fault, and I'm going to have to deal with that. I don't want to ever, because I hear parents all the time, well, the church did this. No, it's like, screw you. You had the kids. These are your kids. You chose to have them. God gave you that responsibility. He didn't give you the responsibility to ship them off to something for 4 hours a week or for 40 hours a week. He said that this is your responsibility, and it's all over Scripture. You teach them the Scriptures, and so what it does subconsciously is, I think that in some capacity it tells a parent, well, you have the church for that. Oh, you have the church for that. But that's actually not the purpose of the church. The purpose of the church is to equip the saints to do the good works out in the world. And one, we don't know if the children are the saints. So we don't know that yet. We can't and we could get into the theological debate. And I think there are genuine Christians that are 16 years old. Of course, that's true, or 14 or 10. but it's proving statistically in America and in the Protestant churches that actually they weren't genuine Christians, because the vast majority of them leave the faith the second that they graduate. And what it does to lazy parents, which most people in America are incredibly lazy, is that it gives them a reason to ship their responsibility out to another institution and not to take it on themselves. And that is, I believe, and this is inflammatory, whatever, an act of hatred upon the child. And so the child recognizes that though the parent is giving them the lip service, that the methods and the actions and the practices and the ways in which they're actually training them and pushing them off to different institutions is completely contradicting the very things that they're saying. And this is happening constantly. I'm not saying that's happening in your scenario specifically, or even maybe at your church specifically, but generally speaking across the country, it's proven statistically that these programs actually don't functionally work properly. And it's because they automatically every single time always negate the responsibility that God has given to the parent. And so I don't think so. I at my old church, I'll be quiet after this. At my old church, we did a podcast because I was on staff there. And I talked about how the youth groups don't statistically work. Actually, at the church itself, a lot of the kids who went through the youth groups, by the time they got to college, a lot of them became LGBTQ. So it's like really not working. And I called that out on the podcast thinking, well, of course, this is statistics and we all accept facts. And I got very frustrated letters and I guess emails from people. And I went and talked to one of these people in the church. I was like, let's talk about it. And when I went to their house and had a 3-hour conversation with this person, and their entire argument was, it works for me. It works for me. It works for me, which is I don't care. That's not what's happening statistically. And so what I've recognized is that when you call this thing out, you're hitting this nerve with a lot of these parents, because maybe it did work for them. Granted, they're not, I don't know if it actually did technically work, because it doesn't seem like they're functioning as biblical Christians in a lot of ways as well. But they're definitely shills to institutions. And I think that that's what they understand Christianity to be. So anyways, that's a long way of saying, I get what you're saying. And I think in an ideal situation, that could probably be somewhat beneficial. But subconsciously, to most parents, especially in a highly materialistic and expressive individualistic society, that just has the reverse effect. And it's showing itself in statistics. I don't know. What do you have to say about it? I don't know. So sorry. Go ahead.
No, I want to commend you for taking your role as the primary discipler for your children seriously.
Sure.
And honestly, if not parent, but if every father understood that it's not, obviously, Proverbs talks about like, listen to the teachings of your father, obey the instruction of your mother. Obviously, it's a partnership between husband and wife, but the primary responsibility is the dad. And that historically is what we've seen, even, especially within Protestantism around the founding of the nation, right? It was the fathers who were responsible for the spiritual formation of their children. And if more men took that role seriously, we would not be in the place we are today. So I absolutely commend you for saying, this is my job. It's my job in matters of spiritual training. It's my job in matters of like literature training and history training. That's amazing. And I commend you. I will also say that there is one study that we talk about in our book that says that children need, I'll have to go back and look at it.
Sure.
But in terms of retaining their faith, right? The kids that maybe not retaining their faith, maybe it had to do with like surviving the teen years in a way with like mental stability. Okay. Is there had to be, because in old youth ministry models, I remember even when my husband was right out of seminary, they talked about how there needed to be one leader for every 5 kids. And like, that's kind of the way that you figured out ratios for like leaders at youth or Sunday school or whatever. Sure. But they actually found it's the inverse. Every child needs to have 5 adults.
Sure. Yeah.
That they feel like knows them completely, loves them completely, but also has enough history with them to correct them when they're wrong, feels like they can go to them with anything, like self-report, like incriminate if needed. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and so you need 5 adults like that. So you guys have 2 automatically. Well, you and your wife.
Yeah.
Which is incredible, right?
That's 4 of them should probably be family. I mean, and a lot of, okay, go ahead.
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, the way that God has structured things is if it's mom and dad, then if you've got 2 sets of especially godly grandparents, and if those grandparents are super involved in the kid's life, talk about like the sweetness of God's design. Like immediately you've got the 5+1 covered, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Personally, for my husband and I, we were connected to our parents, but they were not necessarily people that our children should have gone to for like spiritual formation, spiritual leadership. We have always gotten that from the church. We have always gotten that from godly people at the church who take our kids on missions trips, and they can watch them. They can watch them live faithfully and live their vocation out in a way that's different from their dad and I. Women who have taken my daughters and said, if you ever want to talk, like you can get together. Like my friends that know me, I'm like, you can always go to Mrs. Manning. You can always go to Mrs. Smith.
Peyton Manning's
you have
wife
something you want to talk to them about, I trust them. They love you. You can talk to them. Like, so I will say that like some of those people have been their youth leaders where they're like, I feel like, especially now, my husband is now deployed with the Navy. So there are some good men at my church that take my sons out every now and then for golf or coffee or something like that. And they know that they can go to them. So I commend you for taking your role as disciple maker so seriously. You're exactly right. And the church is going to and should form, should be a really important part of your children growing up in the faith so they can see the word of God manifest in a lot of different kinds of people, so they can see masculinity. I mean, obviously you're very cerebral, and it will be great for them to see faithful, godly men who are mechanics, who are, obviously serving God in ways where maybe they didn't even graduate from high school, but they can be like, that godliness manifests itself in a lot of different ways. I don't have to pigeon myself into masculinity or femininity. You're doing great. You're absolutely on the right track.
Sure.
You're totally, you've got your head in the right space.
Thank you. Yeah. And you talked about in a video that I watched, I think it was for ARC, the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, the principle of subsidiarity. I think that to your point, there is so you start with the family. You start with honestly like the personal institution. I don't know if you even call that the institution, but just the individual and the individual's relationship to God, that submission to God, and then that works itself out to the family. That works itself out to the church, and then you have governing and different types of institutions that are kind of there around that are bigger than that and that are around it. And from my understanding, each time the institution gets bigger and more abstracted from the individual and then the family institution, what it should be doing is propping up the next institution inside of it. And so the church should be propped up by the state in some capacity, or the church, and that might just be like, don't tax the churches or something like that. You know what I mean? But it should be propped up by the state in some capacity, or the church should be propped up by the publications and the media institutions. And then the church then, like you're saying, should then prop up the family, especially in cases like yours. And actually my parents are both first generation Christians themselves. So their parents were not, they grew up in a very messed up house. Well, my mom was a little bit more normal household, but my dad's very messed up household. And it was, my grandparents weren't Christians. But then now my kids, their grandparents on my side are Christians, and then their grandparents on my wife's side are Christians. And so then as you prop up, as these institutions will prop up the local family institution, what you end up getting is generational change in the family institution that is obviously done through the gospel, and then people change their life. And then in some ways you need a little bit less of the help of the church, and then you can actually become the help of the church. I don't know why that's not happening though. I mean, I do know, because I think the institutions are breaking down in America over the past 35 to 50, 100 years. Hard to tell in time wise, but for a long time they've been breaking down. What do you do to then? So what do you do in the church to then encourage people who maybe do have Christian parents and their Christian grandparents, who I've seen this a lot, who are still just saying, we'll just give them to the church and they'll kind of train them, and they'll have this nominal Christian worldview. That's happening a lot, I think. So how do you prop that up? You know what I'm saying? Hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Again, like I know that happens, but I think because we are in a war zone up here, there's very few Christian parents in my world are taking a a sort of laissez-faire approach to their children's formation and discipleship.
Okay.
And we've got parents that are homeschooling, private schooling, public schooling kids, and none of them are looking at this casually. And you're not talking with the right Faust when you're getting into theological matters, because my husband actually is the guy with the doctorate from Gordon Conwell. But, he talks about Francis Schaeffer, who kind of describes the different levels, the generational levels. The first, your parents kind of came into Christianity at a conviction level, right? They saw what it was like to not grow up in a Christian world, and they fiercely grabbed on with all of their might, owned it, and it permeated every aspect of their life. So that's my husband and I too. We weren't raised as Christians. We came in as first generation conviction level Christians. Every next generation, there's a bit of a danger that you are not going to have that same conviction level adherence, because you were somewhat handed it. From your
okay,
parents,
that's interesting.
Right. And so I forget what the 4 steps are, but it's like conviction level, and the next ones get sort of the tradition level, where they're getting an awful lot, and then you kind of go down to like the form. They kind of get the form of it, but the conviction hasn't been passed down. And like, to put a very Baptist-y phrase in here, it's because like God doesn't have grandkids. Like every kid at every generation must decide for themselves, depending on how you want to say that, Calvinistic wise or not, but must opt in on their own as their own kind of conviction level decision. So I do think that there is, obviously we need to be able to transmit our faith to our children in ways where at minimum they know exactly what it is they're saying yes to or they're saying no to. So that means there cannot be a hint of hypocrisy. Right. You have to be able to fully represent the gospel well, both in terms of, I was reading 1 Timothy with my 14-year-old while we were waiting for the school bus to take him to his public school. And we were talking about like, watch your life and doctrine closely, right? We have to do that. We have to watch our life. How do we live? What do we do? What are we saying? How do we use our bodies? How do we use our money? What are we doing with our time? And you have to watch your doctrine closely. You don't get to choose. You have to do both, right? And every person has to come in. Every generation has to come in and do life and doctrine, both of them. So there's advantages to having that trickle down of worldview transmission. And there's disadvantages, because you might think that you've got it when you don't have it. When you just were growing up in the form of the church without the personal dedication and adherence and zeal that you should personally choose as well. So I just think that, obviously if you grow up without a Christian family, it's really hard to find the truth. I mean, unless you are one of the elect and God just kind of leads you through oftentimes very crooked paths to get there. But also, we need to be diligent with our kids to not just assume that they're going to adopt it just because, we have given them the right exposure and the right training, even in age appropriate ways. Like that's the thing about kids is they're not robots. God didn't give us automatons. He did give us free agents. I will say, just for the sake of like disagreeing again, I think because God is eternal, all-knowing, but also relational, that he can and does have a genuine relationship with people at every age, that you can have unborn children who are genuine believers, like John the Baptist, right? Who can recognize Christ. You can have a genuine, God can have a genuine relationship with anybody, even a severely developmentally disabled person.
Yeah, totally.
And while I wouldn't baptize a 3-year-old, I do think that 3-year-olds can be saved, have a genuine relationship with Christ, because, they are responding to the limited knowledge, the limited access, the limited revelation that they're able to understand, and whatever aspect of that genuine revelation that they're genuinely willing to respond to. I do think my children were believers, some of them younger than others. But I don't want to discount that and say, I'll wait and see. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think, and I probably didn't say it right. Mostly what I was trying to say is it's really difficult to actually test it at those ages. And then
faithfulness is the actual measure.
Right. And so, okay. What you were just saying something, and I was thinking about it, but yeah, that's a good point that you just that you make. That yes, well, it's an interesting thing about John the Baptist in the womb. I've thought about that a little bit too, and I thought about some of that in relationship to abortion and how Christians should think about what happens to those babies. And ultimately, I don't know if we know exactly what happens to every single one of them. One reason why we should fight against it. And I think, I can see what you're saying. I had a question in my head and I totally am losing it right now. And it was a good one related to.
Well, I personally should probably wrap up because I have to jump in 10 minutes.
Okay.
But this has been great. It's nice because a lot of the times when you do a lot of podcasts and interviews, you talk about the same thing over and over. So this was a fantastic bit of variety for me. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And just real quick as we wrap it up, can you just kind of give people just a general brief overview as to all the things that you're working on and the book? Because I know that I give an introduction, but I wanted people to hear from you as the book goes and as your organization and what you're doing. And then maybe how you're involved in ARC, because I know you're involved in ARC and that's kind of cool because Jordan Peterson's cool. So
yeah, it's super cool. It's so funny because John Anderson, the way that I describe ARC is, there's this massive advisory board of people that I personally totally fangirl over, like Constant and Ion Hirsi joined recently and all of that. So John Anderson is one of the 4 kind of founding members of ARC, and he came to my house about 2 years ago, interviewed me and Stacy about our first book, Them Before Us, which is sort of the manual for our global movement. And he mentioned something about what I call a righteous cabal that he was organizing. And I'm like, hey, sounds like a lot of fun. He's like, well, maybe I'll rope you in. And so then he did, I got in sort of on the formulation level when they were just hypothesizing about what this would look like and inviting initial advisory board members. So I got on board with that really early, which was such an honor. Yeah. And, we had our first conference last year in London. I was able to write a research paper for them. And kudos to ARC, because I always say what they're trying to do is be the righteous inverse of the World Economic Forum. That's really what we want ARC to be, is same level of global influence, but principles that lead to human flourishing, not principles that see humans as a parasite on, the planet.
Yeah.
So I obviously take a very strong stance on in the social fabric stream, which is one of their main planks, in terms of what, the smallest institution, if you can, not including the individual, right, which they have a lot of emphasis on personal responsibility, bottom up, shouldering the load voluntarily, which is great. Then beyond that, you have to talk about social fabric, how we weave ourselves together in relationship. Family is a big part of that. We obviously take an unflinching view that family is not about adults and validating adults, that it is about justice for children. And so it is a very direct advocacy for what we would think of as the traditional family. And that actually takes a lot of guts right now to be a global organization and take your stand on there. So I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And they've been wonderful to be with, wonderful to work with. I get to go, next month. And
did you go to the conference this last?
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah. That's the great thing about the advisory board members is we all get to invite people and get to be a part of kind of forming the conference. It's just it's a joy. It's an honor. So that's happening. I always tell people Them Before Us is the most influential nonprofit you've never heard of. Like we are, it's amazing. Like the kind of global influence and opportunity that we have on behalf of kids. Like I said at the very first advisory board meeting that I went to, if I do my job, children will be accurately represented. Their needs and their interests and their rights will be reflected in all of my comments. I am here to advocate and represent them. I'm not here to push a specific lobbying group or perspective or even Christianity. I am here to represent the interests of children because they are never considered. They never get a voice. They don't lobby. They don't blog. They don't write books. We have to advocate on their behalf. So that's what we do at Them Before Us, thembeforeus.com. Go subscribe to our newsletter, donate. We are on a global crusade to defend kids in cultures. Like I said, we want to change hearts and change laws. We have so many projects and plans, so much more, so many opportunities I have to turn down because we're just not big enough yet. And it just pisses me off. I'm like, more and more. I want more. I want more people to do all this work. Pro-Child Politics is our latest book where we are going to, if I have my way, I'm going to train everybody to think about every political issue primarily through elevating the rights and well-being of children, because we have forced them to shoulder the burden of our selfishness, our safety, our sex, our stuff for so long. And we're crippling them. We are crippling them. I mean, their life, family, mind, body, security, and future are in jeopardy because we have put us before them. And that needs to change. So I would just say, like, buy the book, get them before us. The first book, Pro-Child Politics, the third book. If you really, really want to make Andy mad, you can also get the second book.
Yeah. Go ahead and get the second book if you want to send your kids to the public schools. But
it's really great even if you homeschool, because the woke is coming for your children, whether you homeschool or private school.
Totally true.
Like, inculcate them, inoculate them against the woke mind virus, because it doesn't matter if you're in a blue state or red state. No. They are going to try to find your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And I know that we disagreed on a lot, but like everything that I think that what you're doing is awesome. And it's encouraging for me because I feel like I'm in this bubble in Madison where I'm just around a bunch of cowardly, pathetic, nominal wannabe Christians who don't want to fight for anything other than their, personal, for their affluence and personal peace is the way that Francis Schaeffer puts it. So yeah, thanks for doing that. I've read a decent amount of the book. I have the PDF. They said they might send me a hard copy. I'm a hard copy person, so I'd love a hard copy. And yeah, the ARC thing is awesome. So anyways, thanks so much for doing this podcast. I really appreciate it.
It was a joy to be with you. Thanks for having me.